Hey there! Make sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you'll help amazing folks like you find us. We want to continue to grow our spiritual therapist and practitioner space so that more folks who are committed to helping Black QT plus folks heal can find us. But we really can't do it without your support. So thank you so much for being in community with us. Thank you for being here. And we really want you to stay connected. So make sure you like and subscribe to this channel. And if you really want to stay connected with us outside of here, make sure you sign up for our first quarter moon newsletter, where we share insights on topics that benefit spiritual therapists, social workers, and practitioners who are really dedicated to integrating spirituality into their work while staying committed to supporting Black QT folks on their spiritual journeys. We promise never to spam you, so head over to the website and sign up today. You can go to reclaimingsoulworkpod.com to sign up on our landing page. And don't forget to follow us on socials. We're on IG and TikTok at Reclaiming Soul Work.
Welcome back, spiritual practitioners. This season, we're centering learning.
That's right. We're your hosts, Biani and Sequoia, and we're here to delve into the heart of our conversations, focusing on the lack of culturally rooted resources to support QT BIPOC folks navigating religious and spiritual trauma.
In our previous seasons, we emphasized the importance of unlearning, decolonizing, and divesting from oppressive teachings and institutions. If you're new here, welcome, and make sure to check out our previous episodes on our channel. Now, we're dedicated to deepening our knowledge and understanding so that we can better support ourselves and our clients.
And as we navigate this season of learning, we aim to provide you with the tools, tips, and insights to help you on your path of reclaiming to soul work.
Whether you're well versed in spiritual practices or just beginning your journey, join us as we explore the intersectional impact of religious and spiritual trauma on mental health.
So sit back, relax, and get ready to elevate your understanding of mental health and spiritual well being as we embark on this season of learning. Let's get started. Y'all, we are so excited to be back. I know it's been a minute, but we back. Um, and we're really hyped. Mostly I'm really hyped too, but we're diving into a hot topic that is such a hot topic in like spiritual therapy and social work spaces. And we're so hyped and excited to have this guest because we're going to get really into it. And it's about what it means to integrate spirituality into trauma informed social work. Um, there's so many conversations about spirituality, and there's so many conversations about spiritual therapy, but we haven't seen conversations about what it means to do it with integrity, to do it in alignment with like trauma informed social work. And so, listen, we know that y'all been waiting for this conversation. We want you to stay here, and you don't want to miss this conversation we're about to have. So, if you haven't done so already, get your friends, get your professors, get your people to share this episode right now, because I think it's going to be a really, really, really good one. Um, yes, it's going to be a good one. So, this topic, integrating spirituality into trauma informed social work, our guest is an amazing social work practitioner who's going to talk to us about exploring this journey of those living in the shadow of the image of God. I kind of love that, so I just had to sit with that a little bit. Um, and the unique challenges that people who are separated from their faith communities are navigating. And we know that there are a lot of you who want to do this work, who want to integrate spirituality and might not know how. And we also know that we need to make space for like the experience of how the separation that folks navigate from their faith community impacts their identity. And and because of that, we as social workers need to learn and support clients who are navigating this form of religious trauma. Um, and we're going to be here as we usually are, challenging a lot of like traditional social work practice that might not really make space for this. So whether you're a therapist, a student, a social worker, we feel like this conversation is for you so that it can help you support clients who are in their journeys of healing from spiritual abuse or religious trauma while they honor their unique path to healing. Um, so yeah, you if you're excited like me, let us know in the comments right now. Hit us up. Tell us what you're excited about when it comes to this conversation, because we know it's something that really needs to be had. And please make sure you like and subscribe to our channel so others like you can find us. We really believe these conversations are crucial, they're necessary. And every subscriber, every person that subscribes to our channel helps us reach more people. So make sure before you keep going, y'all, before we keep going, just stop, like, and subscribe to the channel right now. Okay? Yeah, you did that? Y'all did it already? Okay, great. Okay, great. um, so before we get into it, we also want to shout out something that we at Reclaiming Soul Work are really excited about. And we're hosting our first workshop, Resisting the Woo Woo, Ethical Considerations to Integrating Spirituality and Therapy. And y'all, we are so excited. Sequoia and I have been working on this for a long time. We put our heart, our soul, our love, and our labor into this, and we really want you to be there. We know that spirituality can be a powerful tool and is necessary part of healing and therapy. But if you don't have critical reflection and if you don't have a relationship to decolonial healing practices, we as spiritual therapists can be complicit in causing deep harm to our clients. And we are creating this workshop and creating this space because we know as therapists, we have to be in relationship to resisting the harms of uncritical woo-woo culture, y'all. And some of you might be like, woo-woo culture. Yes, woo-woo culture. Um, Things like spiritual bypassing, toxic positivity, the disavowal of power, cultural appropriation, and other spiritually rooted harms that happen when we participate in woo-woo culture and we're not really critical of the things that we're doing. This is a 2-hour virtual workshop where we're going to talk about these ethical considerations, things that people are not talking about in our profession. We're going to be using case examples, narrative therapy tools like bibliotherapy, mindfulness practices, and of course, if y'all know us, we're going to use some divination too. And we're going to reflect on these, how we navigate these ethical dilemmas and how we approach our spiritual work as therapists with intention, with respect, with integrity, and a commitment to social justice. So you might be like, oh, I'm in there, I'm ready. Where do we sign up? Let me tell you, this is happening Sunday, June 8th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And all you got to do is sign up. Registration is open. Go to bit.ly/RSW resist. Tickets are on sale now. We also have sliding scale discounts. And if you want to know about those, make sure you stay connected with the newsletter because we're going to share those with you too. But this is a great workshop for students, whether you newly graduated or you're currently a social work or counseling student. It's for those of us who are spiritually inclined or aware. It's for those of us who've been doing spiritual therapy and are feeling like, ooh, there's some ethical things that I'm navigating that no one really talked to me about. Like this is the space for you. So if you are interested, make sure that you register for the workshop. And if you want more information, stay connected with our newsletter and on our social media channels, because we're going to talk more about this workshop and why you need to be there. Okay? Okay. All
Thank you
right.
so much, Biani. I know. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about the workshop. I feel like we are going to get into some things and make community, create community around these really important intersections. So, welcome again, y'all. Welcome, welcome, welcome. The last time that we live streamed, we had a part 2 on our conversation about what do we do in this moment in the social work field. We had a part 1 and a part 2. Part 1 we had a panel discussion with a number of spiritual social workers, so definitely check that out. Part 2, we focused on a recent journal article. Yep, from social work. That was really interesting. I think that it is definitely worth a rewatch, a re-listen, and to definitely check out the resources associated with that particular podcast episode as well. Um, Reclaiming Soul Work is a heart centered podcast by two queer Black femme spiritual healers and social workers who explore the intersections of magic, spirituality, mental health, and everything in between. My name is Sequoia. I use she and her pronouns. I am currently in Charlotte on Catawba Indigenous land. My big three are I'm an Aquarius sun, an Aries moon, and a Libra rising. Um, what we usually then move into is what are we reading? What are we watching? Do we have like a recent divination tool that we want to share? But right before the live, Biani and I was talking about our kind of prep question into interviewing our guests, which is more about like trauma informed care and what I've been thinking about related to that. So I'm just gonna hold my thoughts around that. Um, and then we'll see if we get into that, Biani. Maybe we don't want to talk about that per se right now. Maybe we do want to just center on some joy. What are we reading, watching, or a divination tool? So I'll follow your lead on that.
I'm here for all of it. I'm here for the joy. I'm here for the tea. I'm here for the serious, the serious. My name is Biani. I use she, they, ella pronouns. Um, what am I saying? What am I saying about myself? Um I live on Lenape Hoking land, also known as Philly/Delaware area. And yeah, I'll talk a little bit about my lineages. I guess I'll something that really resonates for me is like I am I am Dominican and I'm also from the Bronx, Muncie Lenape territory. So, those two places feel like my ancestral lands. And I feel that more and more as I've gotten older, how connected I feel to the Bronx. And like when I go there, I'm like, ooh, feels like home, feels like also parts of home. But yeah, yeah, my people are from Dominican Republic or Haiti, or we would call Haiti, the island Haiti. And yeah, in terms of my big three, I'm a Virgo sun, Cancer rising, and Aries moon. Um, y'all, I can't, so what I'm reading, I can't think about what I'm reading because I just watched Sinners a few days ago and I can't get the movie out of my head. And if anybody here has watched Sinners and y'all want to talk, please hit me up on socials. But it's a movie that is just like so powerful, and it's like I need to watch it again to get more wisdom from it. But I really enjoyed it, and I also there was a lot of messages around ancestral healing and intergenerational healing. Like it was powerful. So that is what's been playing out in my mind since I watched it this weekend. Um, yeah, yeah, we were talking about trauma informed social work. I think the thing, I'm going to shift to that. We both were reflecting on if we've taken classes in trauma informed, and we both couldn't remember. I mean, it's been a while since we've been, but like, there's something about that too. And if y'all hear social work folks or like folks who got their degrees or are currently students, are y'all taking classes in trauma informed social work or trauma informed care? Let us know. I teach in a school of social work locally, and there are no classes on trauma informed care. My students are always asking me, like, "Can you teach it?" And I'm just like, you know, I don't know if that's even in the curriculum. Maybe our guests can tell us what their school is like. But we've been reflecting on that too, around like trauma informed care and like what does it mean in our culture? Like everybody's throwing out the word trauma. People are also throwing out the word trauma informed care, and I'm always like, "What do you mean by that? Like when you use it, what do you mean?" So what you've been holding, Sequoia? Please bring it into the fold.
Well, again, right before we hopped on here, I was just thinking about a podcast that I listened to, and it's been a little while since I listened to this particular podcast, but they were just talking about trauma informed care and it being more of a trendy a trendy word, that from their perspective, many mental health practitioners um, really couldn't identify, name, ground in trauma informed care. And so I thought that was really interesting, because I agree with them, that it feels like many of the spaces, um, yeah, that say or have this label of being trauma informed, there are just some interesting things that are bypassed, and yeah, I again, like right before we hopped on here, I was saying that the school I went to, the focus at that time was on privilege, power, and oppression. Like that was the, POP was the acronym. Now I am very sure that many of the classes, had trauma informed care as a part of, again, community work, whatever the courses were. But I don't think I remember an explicit trauma informed care course. So that's definitely had me pausing about that. Now I've taken trauma informed care trainings, you know, like just thinking about work in like domestic violence with survivors, things like that. But it's definitely something, an area that for me I have to search, for that specific focus for sure.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
I always think about my students. They're always like, well, what does it mean to be trauma informed? And that question is so, I appreciate the question because it brings me back to the foundation of it. But it also, what does it mean in a culture where like we're just throwing out that word everywhere? Like we're talking about trauma. This is traumatizing, trauma, trigger. Like we're using it in our everyday conversations. And it makes you wonder, what does it look like in practice? Like, do we really,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciated your point related to trauma informed care, and especially in social work, that I'll say that it's lacking because we've had conversations about how spirituality in social work, is a very specific track, or you don't have those conversations. And so when we talk about trauma informed social work, right? I definitely didn't have any conversations about spirituality whenever I was talking about trauma informed care. Like, no,
Not at
So I
all.
think that that's something really interesting to consider and keep thinking about, related to just even depth and breadth of skills, So
Mm, right. And so, um, I mean, this ties into like why we're having this conversation today.
yeah, yeah.
And why are we having the conversation about integrating spirituality into trauma informed social worker? Well,
Hmm.
one, because we're excited for our guest who's coming soon, to talk about this, but also as spiritual social workers, and we've been doing this podcast for quite a while now. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of the most common questions we get are around, well, how do you integrate spirituality into therapy?
Hmm.
How do you talk about it with your clients? How do you do an intake? How do you bring tarot in? How do you, like, how do you bring their spiritual practices in? And there's a lot of hesitancy people have about it. Like, there's like I don't know if I'm going to call it fear, but because we weren't, I mean, in a lot of our social work schools, we weren't really trained or even made space to talk about spirituality, unless the client, we only talk about it in the realm of like their faith is a protective factor, their religion is a protective factor. At least in my program, it was rare that we even talked about spirituality as a dimension of wellness and healing, and also a dimension that could also come with a lot of like joy, community, kinship, but also grief, trauma, and loss. And so, like, it's like even that we don't even hold the nuances when it comes to spirituality. And so, we want to have the conversation here around what it means to integrate it, the nuances, things to consider, things to think about, approaches.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I think that nuance that you just highlighted is super important, right? Like the protective factor piece, right? But spirituality being a dimension of wellness, but also holding the complexity, the spectrum of that, right? I think is super important. And I think the other piece too is just to highlight, like when we say trauma informed, we're talking about like safety, trustworthiness and transparency, collaboration and mutuality, humility, right? Like culturally responsive care. These aspects of trauma, being trauma informed. Um, yeah. And whether or not your approach has these considerations or these principles in mind, and then how that's facilitated right in the space. I, think that this is not only a really important conversation, just related to, again, like right before we hopped on here, getting a refresher in what does trauma informed care look like for me in 2025, you know, where am I related to these principles surrounding trauma informed care, right? I think it's a great check-in. As even again with this piece with our upcoming workshop, right? So yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Um, so before we bring in our guest, I'm going to invite you to another commercial segment, y'all. Um, so it's so weird to always like, I'm going to practice it, but if you are a tarot or journaling nerd, and if you're anything like me, you're going to love what I'm about to say right now. um, I I am a tarot practitioner who has a wide collection of decks, y'all. Probably close to 200 decks now. And because of that, I've the last 10 years, I've curated an amazing collection of tarot and oracle decks from independent creators. And I'm not greedy, y'all. I'm all about the collective. I am not keeping these decks, which is why I opened my shop. And I have a shop where I curated really cool selection of tarot decks, one of a kind divination tools. And it's perfect for folks who really are like me, maybe, who really care about divination, but see it as part of their sacred and creative practices. Um, so I want to encourage you to check out my shop. Um, you can use the bit.ly code, bit.ly.com bit.ly / tarot store to check out that collection I have. It's on sale, pretty affordable prices. Now, if you're a journaling nerd and you're really looking for a way to like deepen more self-reflection, I created this really cool free journal prompts for anybody. You literally, it's free, ain't gonna cost you anything. One is on self-compassion, and the other one, because we just celebrated Mother's Day here in the US, the other one is for Black mamas and parents. And because I'm a doula, and I love working with folks who are expanding families, especially Black QT BIPOC folks, Black QT folks, and BIPOC folks. I offer these journal prompts for free, and so yeah, support Black QT practitioners. Check out my store. If you're not into buying that stuff, share it with somebody who might be. And if you love journaling, check out the prompts. Just check it out on bit.ly / tarot store and explore the offerings that I have to offer. Hopefully, it nourishes your soul as it does me. And yeah, check it out.
Thank you, Biani. Thank you so much. And y'all support our friends, support the store. Okay. I went back through my emails because I was looking for the first time that I met Professor Johnson. And because I'm like, it was at an event. And then when I looked at my emails, I'm like, that was over a year ago. Then I was thinking about that time of the year. Um, But so I saw on the University of North Carolina out of Chapel Hill, they were having a queerness and spirituality event. It was the spirituality caucus. They were having a queerness and spirituality event, and the speaker was a mental health practitioner that I happen to follow on Instagram. And I was like, okay, this is cool. Like, I want to, get connected to the School of Social Work. But then also, this person that's speaking at the event is a local, therapist whose work I follow, and they seem cool. And so I reached out because I didn't know if this event was virtual and had an access question. And so Professor Johnson is the one who responded to me about this access question and was so nice, so gracious, just made sure that I was able to, attend the event, that I could hear everybody, that I was a part of, because of course I was the only one that was virtual. But made sure, that I was engaged throughout the entire time. And then, me, I'm always looking for folks to connect with, to see how I can support their work. And so afterwards, I was like, oh, let's please stay connected. There was some mention about the podcast during that event. And so, yeah, to be here now a year later and have her here as a guest on the podcast to talk about her work, and then this clearly important to my work, our particular topics related to the podcast, and then themes that I've had to work through myself, related to not only being a practitioner, but also, someone that was raised Southern Baptist, and also identifies as queer, Um, so that's how we got connected. And that's how we're here today. And we're really excited to talk more, hear more about her work, invite her in. Let's do it.
Hello,
Hello.
hello. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here with us this evening. We would love it if you would introduce yourself. Please let us know your pronouns. And yeah, hop right into telling us more about yourself.
Sure, sure. I am Karan Johnson. I use she, her pronouns. I am a professor at UNC Chapel Hill in the School of Social Work. I'm also a clinician in private practice in Durham. And that practice sits on the land of the Catawba, the Cherokee, the Eno, the Lumbee, the Occaneechi, the Shakori, and the Tuscarora peoples of North Carolina. And I am grateful to be here. I guess maybe a bit more about what I do. I teach direct practice courses in the School of Social Work. I also develop courses. You all were talking about trauma informed care. One of the courses that I adapted for our online MSW program is around core components and skills for trauma informed practice with children and their families. And I am also a professor that teaches around the professional use of self. And I developed a course around religion and spirituality and social work practice that was just sort of debuted last year. It was very well received. And I've already had students say, Karan, I want to take your class. I've already tried to queue it up and put it on my schedule. And so I'm very excited to know that they're excited and got something out of it. I also facilitate trainings, and it's so funny. I have this class, which is a 8-week class, and then I've taken that and turned it into a 4-hour ethics training, and then I had to turn it into a 45-minute workshop that I offered last week, and so now we are here. And so this is helping me practice my skills of expressing or sharing this information. But I do try to not only support my students, but also my colleagues in behavioral health professions understand the importance of and how to integrate religion or spirituality or faith into the work that they do, and also recognize the impact of it on their own lives, because that's where it starts. It's where it hits us first. And maybe that's part of the source of hesitance or excitement. And so I talk with folks around that. I also have chosen to invest my time and energy as part of my clinical practice in modalities that are connected to embodied healing. And so includes elements of spirituality. I am certified through the Association of Clinical Pastoral Educators in spiritually integrated psychotherapy. I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner. I am certified also in mental health integration for chaplain services, which is a place of interprofessional practice between healthcare or behavioral health professionals and chaplains who work in the VA or the Department of Defense system or in anywhere where chaplains can be found. And I also am trained in sound healing and really just try to create the space in my micro practice, like I'm in my office right now, but it's a little bitty practice because I'm doing all of these other things. But I see people in this space in a place that is deliberately rooted in liberation. I'm very deliberate about what the space looks like, about how people are able to access the space, including in terms of income, including in terms of the hours that I am in the place. I'm here this evening because I see clients in the evening, because I want to make sure that there's always access, not in a way that will risk people's financial well-being. They don't have to take off work in the middle of the day to see me. Plus, I got a job, so I got to go to that job during the day. But it's important that they have that space. So I see them in the evenings and on the weekends. I'm also a student. I am in a Doctor of Ministry program at Vanderbilt Divinity School in integrative chaplaincy. That's where I fell in love with the chaplains, is what I say. And it is around interprofessional learning and practice among chaplains. And there's such compatibility, and I'm sure I'll talk about that again. I've like I said, I love them big, so I will talk about them quite a bit, and also how they've informed my own approach as a social worker. I'm also the granddaughter of a Christian mother or grandmother. I am the daughter of a Buddhist mother, and I am the mother of a son who is a practitioner of Ifa. And so my life has been informed by these beautiful fragrances of spirituality and religion. And I think it's essential that if I wanted them to have the space to be cared for and seen and to process all their stuff, include my son, because I'm sure he got some trauma from having me as a mother, to have that space, that these areas of importance for them are available. And so I've sought to provide that to my own clients, and I hope to support other people as they learn how to do that.
You're amazing. Like, uh, I'm so grateful for your introduction. That's what I'm just going to say.
Oh, thank you. I was like, let me stop talking. I was saying a whole lot of words. Look at that.
A lot of magic, a lot of wisdom, a lot of nuggets
Thank you.
already. Yeah. So, Kurt, did you have a question? Because I just wanted to say that's all I had.
No, I'm just sitting with much of what you shared, and the places of interest and, yeah, I would love to hear more about, your work and kind of what inspires you right now related to the work that you're doing.
Well, I will say that what inspires me is what, well, first of all, I'm a social work fan. So I love social work, and believe that social work exists in part because the need for community has always existed. And part of what we do as social workers is facilitate access to well-being and environments where we can cultivate community. And particularly as a Black woman who was raised in a Christian tradition and also raised in a Buddhist tradition where community is essential. It is what forms identity, it's what forms our values, and it also is what forms the community over the long term, even down to who we meet and marry and who we make babies with and who we spend our time with. Those things often are informed by faith communities. And so it has always been important to me religion, organized religion specifically, has always been a part of my life. My grandmother actually was a church secretary. So I say I grew up in the church, like literally in the building, running up and down the pews and learning about the rituals and needs and supports that people receive in faith communities. And then my mother's Buddhist tradition. She is a Nichiren Shoshu Buddhist. If you all remember this a long time ago, the movie by about Tina Turner, where she chanted Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, that's my mother. That's what she has chanted since I was 3 years old. And so to see how these communities come together based on shared faith, but also the shared values, has reminded me of the importance. And when we as social workers talk about natural supports versus paid supports, often that is for people what those natural supports come from, is from spiritual communities, religious communities. And we also can't forget that in social work, a number of the social services that are provided outside of DSS and CPS happen in churches. The food pantries, the clothing closets, the NA or the AA meetings, or the ESL classes, or the tutoring and the after school programs often happen in these spaces. And so communities are made richer by those experiences and by their presence. And individually and sometimes collectively, they are harmed. And so we've got to be able to hold that tension and sit with it. And that's what my work is about. In addition to teaching just general direct practice courses, it's important for me to have a hand in people understanding how to know at least where to start, at least what to say. And we use assessment as the beginning place, the entry, and also developing rapport. And if we're going to use the bio, psycho, socio, spiritual assessment, what are we going to do with that spiritual part? Like, we can't just ask the question and just set it to the side. If we ask the question, there should be some meaning and intention behind it, and some capacity to use that either as a point of reflection or a jumping off point for trauma processing, or to use it as a spiritual resource. And so that's what my work is. I also endeavor to provide placements that help people to learn about that integration, whether it is from a faith perspective. So I've had students in faith-based practicum. In addition to the other, we have so many placements. I'm very grateful to be at the School of Social Work at UNC. It's an amazing program. And we have such a wide variety of placements. And we believe in the value of making space for these ways of knowing and ways of being in community. So I have students that are doing dual purpose placements, getting their social work practicum hours, and getting a unit of clinical pastoral education if they want to become chaplains. Because, you know, chaplains don't necessarily have to be religious. They can be atheist, but they can provide and practice what is necessary to support people. And that's the thing that I help also people to understand as social workers. We don't have to be religious in order to support people in what they need. And we don't have to deny our own religion in order to provide those things.
Thank you so much for that connection. I heard the kind of intersections to community, faith-based spaces. And then there's also this piece that you mentioned related to how social work services can be captured within spaces like DSS, but then how the church a lot of the times has been an in-between or another support for, you know, certain access to basic needs. And so wondering about this next question that we have here about how do you envision the process of decolonizing social work, and what role does decolonizing religion or spirituality play in that process for you? Just given many times, you know, the impacts that those spaces, meaning like church, social service spaces, the history of social work and things like that, how those can impact and come into play even in the relationship building.
Mhm. Yeah. So when I think about the idea of decolonizing in this context, I think of the idea of liberation. It is freedom. It's less about
Mm,
structure and naming things in another way, and allowing space for questioning, and for the client or for the practitioner even to name for themselves, to define, to redefine that language of social work. It isn't really for me to see decolonizing as the priority if that's not the client's priority. As I told a client earlier today, that's not my business. It is my business to hold the space for the meaning that they need to make in order to create the life that is important to them. And I think that is a form of decolonization, because historically we've been told this is what it looks like to be a good person, to be a good therapist, to be a good social worker, to be a good Black woman, to be a good human. And maybe it's time now, been long past time, to ask the question, is good a generalizable term? Is right and healthy, are these right and healthy and normal, are these like generalizable terms? Or is part of decolonizing asking what it means in our particular context at this time, at this point on the historical timeline? And so that's what I see as sort of decolonizing social work, because my role isn't to decolonize on behalf of others, but to create the space where they feel welcome to define what that means, and then to follow them on the journey as we go toward that definition.
I feel like we can be with this question for hours.
Absolutely.
And I'm really grateful for the invitation to think about um, that maybe part of the way that you're thinking about decolonizing is helping the client define it for themselves. Um, I'm thinking about the piece around spirituality and religion.
Mhm.
And what do you think it means, like in your sense of like to decolonize spirituality or religion, or like how do we bring that into our work as social workers with clients?
Mhm.
Because like to your point, we don't you actually it was a really something we've said in our episodes before about how we talk about the biopsycho social, but we forget the biopsycho spiritual social, right? Like that
Mhm.
there's always the way that the spiritual's forgotten. And I'm
Sure.
wondering about how you think about like what it means to decolonize spirituality, but like how do we bring it in into the work?
Yeah. So it's interesting because when I do these presentations or trainings, excuse me, I start off sometimes with the definition of certain things. And some words have very specific definitions. The word faith has a pretty specific definition. The word religion has a pretty specific definition. But the definition that is universal around spirituality is there is no universal definition. There are many ways of understanding spirituality. And again, you can be spiritual and not religious. And so part of my thinking around this idea of decolonizing is I don't get to name what my client brings. I am there to be curious about what it has been named for them and what is the impact of that naming on them. If that naming has led to help and support and a clear sense of identity, we're going to celebrate it. Whether or not I was raised in it or not, again, that's not my business. My business is making sure that the space is welcome for them as they weigh these. Let them roll around in their mouth and just sort of sit in their body and notice what comes up as they say the words, and then determine whether or not that still fits them. Is there another way that we would describe what you're experiencing in this moment? And that's one of the reasons that assessment is so important when we're thinking about doing work around spirituality and religion, because there are explicit questions that you ask in an assessment. Do you believe in God or a higher power? Do you have a church family? Are there particular rituals that you engage in that bring you help or support during difficult times. But then there are also implicit questions like, what brings you joy? Like, what are the things that help you feel hope? Where are the places that you go to find meaning in difficult times? And that may not be in a building, a mosque. It may not be in a space that is formally designed for organized religion. It could be skating down the street. It could be playing ultimate frisbee. It could be gaming. It could be any of those things. And part of that decolonizing is understanding that there are more words to help name experiences and to then redefine those experiences. And this is not necessarily about theology. When I'm talking about the decolonization or the integration of religion or spirituality, I am not in the role as a theologian or as a minister. Again, it is about the space and making sure that we have the curiosity and humility to understand what clients are bringing and what they want to do with what they bring. And that, I think, applies for religion and spirituality as well. Because what I name, one of the things that I say in one of my trainings, we talk about cultural markers. And so, Sequoia, you said something about being raised Southern Baptist. So one thing I would note is one cultural marker would be around music for you, raised Southern Baptist. And what comes to your mind when you think about music in that religious tradition? What would you say comes to your mind?
Well, I mean, I get visuals, and the visuals, I see a tambourine. Um, I I see, like somebody at the piano. It's just very lively, very connected. It's also a time of um usually like reflection, prayer, deep thought, fellowship. That's what I get when I hear that.
Yes, yes. And I love how you not only described it, you talked about the tambourine and the piano, these things, but you also talk about fellowship and connection. And so for me, that's not a cultural marker. I grew up in a religious tradition that only sang a cappella music and believed that instruments in worship were sinful. And so it would be wrong of me to assume just because, we both have brown skin and we both wear eyeglasses and we both got on hoop earrings, that we both resonate with worship or praise in the same way. And that's part of the work that we do in incorporating someone else's needs or beliefs or reality into the work we do, is being curious about it and not being assumptive that because this was my experience, it's got to be everybody's experience. Because I genuinely would not know what to do with a tambourine if you handed it to me. Like, be like, oh, this is nice. What am I supposed to do with it? Because there's no cultural marker or point of reference for me from a worship standpoint. Does that make sense?
I really appreciate that. We've been talking about spiritual assessment tools for quite a while on our podcast, and I think this is like a chef's kiss moment where I'm like, yes, this is like what we've been trying to say too, that in some ways we can't try to build across sameness, right? Like, and this idea that we both, right? Like, um, what it could mean to Sequoia growing up Southern Baptist could mean something totally different if I grew up Southern Baptist. Like
Mhm.
our markers would vary and they're all really important, right? But I love that. I love the way you framed it. That really resonates. And that's going to stay with me for a moment. But let's move on to our next question because I think this term in the shadow of the image of God is such a beautiful term. And if you could explain that or like explore and what it means for someone who might be experiencing religious or spiritual trauma.
Mhm.
And then maybe the second question, like how it might show up or manifest differently for others, perhaps, like what it could look like in different ways. But yeah,
Sure.
in the shadow of the image of God, that's powerful. So yes.
Sure. So I want to just acknowledge that that language is typically connected to Judeo-Christian tradition, and that this may not fit for every expression of religion that fits under that umbrella. So it may be about the shadow of the image of the divine, of that which connects community, that which creates sameness. This may be that which creates a communal identity, which means that you are safe and welcome and you're validated as a member of that community. But when I think about it from a Christian tradition, it is this idea that that humans mirror God in their moral and spiritual and intellectual nature. And so that mirroring is often taught within specific organized religious contexts. So we know, just like I said, for me, the image of God in some way is a cappella. It is without instruments. And so it is using the natural voice to speak and to sing and to express my worship there in that particular environment. For others, the image of God is around moral decisions that they make, who they, and again, morality is rooted in the ethical values that we are transmitted from our caregivers and from our communities of origin. And very often that is related to religion. The Ten Commandments, whatever code of conduct that is a part of the religious tradition, sets the tone and expectations for right, correct, and acceptable behavior. And so when people diverge from that type of right moral conduct, if it is around premarital sex, it's around gender identities, sexuality, any number of things. If it's around dating someone outside of your religious tradition, there can be a separation because the community says you no longer bear the image of God because God doesn't do these things. God doesn't sin or act in this immoral way. And so that can lead to excommunication, disfellowship, somebody being sat down, being turned away from, where their families don't have anything to do with them, people that they grew up with, spent time with, know the ins and outs of their homes with, no longer will acknowledge them or will be in community with them because they have fallen outside of this image and they lie in the shadow of what has been and are no longer connected. And so the work that I encourage in with my clients, and I hope that clinicians are able to do, is uncoupling the identity of God from an institution. And what are the elements of that image that still persist in that person? And very often it's rooted in values. What are the values that you hold as important? Are they integrity? Are they loyalty or family or love or service or hospitality or humility? And is it possible to live these things out that you were told were only possible or valid or accessible within this specific place? Is it possible to uncouple those things and recouple them with a new environment, a new space? And again, I want to just emphasize this isn't about theology. A person's theology is not my business. And in fact, it's unethical based on our code of ethics for me to attempt to proselytize or to debate any sort of religious doctrine in the clinical space. And this may be controversial, but one of the ways that I liken it is if I need to go get open heart surgery, I don't care if the surgeon is praying over what he's going to do while he's washing his hands. I need to know, did he pay attention when they were teaching about that particular surgery? Does he have the skills? And does he have the orientation and the capacity to serve me in a way that's going to save and enrich my life? So as a clinician who has opted into behavioral health or a healthcare environment, I have to be very careful about what's my business and what is not. If my role is as an evangelizer, then that doesn't belong in the clinical space because actually North Carolina law says that I can't do that. My code of ethics says I can't do it. And so part of the work, again, that we're doing is being careful to hold the space for our own religious or spiritual beliefs while doing the work that we are tasked with doing, that we opted into doing when we became social workers. Did that quite answer your question? Okay.
I appreciate your response. Especially, this last piece about evangelizing and proselytizing in the therapy space. Um, I what initially popped into my mind was conversion therapy and what happens, in spaces where that is being facilitated and the foundation that usually happens. It also makes me think about, in some of the therapist Facebook groups, there have been times where, people ask questions about spiritual practices, and folks who identify more as Christian usually have a response that is around the energy of, oh, that's demonic, you know. um I wouldn't they'll say things like, I know that's ancestral work is demonic, devilish, those kinds of things. And so when I think about your response related to, not only the ethics, but then this piece about how our religion can show up during clinical time, I think about even your point about, what you're saying being controversial. Um,
No, it is. And here's the place where I remind all of us that this is how I practice here in 2025 as my human self as a clinical social worker. And it is not my role, it is not within my power, nor is it within my ethical orientation to tell someone that this is the way to be. This is an option. And just like my grandma used to say, you can eat the bone, you can eat the meat and leave the bones. And if it resonates with you, then absolutely, then this is what I encourage people explore more. And if it feels like it is a violation of your deeply held religious beliefs, then there are decisions that you have to make around how to address a person's needs. Are you the person to meet those needs? Is this something that you might need to refer out around? Is it something that you might need to process with really good supervision? Is it something that you might need to have? This may be the place where it's important to know about your spiritual leaders, your religious leaders in your community, so that other people can support you in working through this thing. One of the statements that one of my mentors, Russell Siler Jones, he wrote a book called Spirit in Session: How to Deal with Your Client's Spirituality and Your Own. And one of the things he said that I just love is he says the emphasis in assessment is on assessing the impact that spirituality has had on someone's life and not the truth claims of the spiritual beliefs. Because again, I am not trained. I am trained as a seminarian, as a divinity student, but I am not trained to be an evangelizer, a debater about doctrine. That's not my role. And again, this is the way that I believe it's important to engage. And I invite people, if it is something that does not resonate with them, to find the supports that they need. If they believe that they are faith-based counselors, find like-minded individuals who can support them in developing that aspect of their clinical skills, and make sure, as a part of your ethical duty, to be fully, because here's another thing about trauma-informed work. Trauma-informed work is about consent and choice. And so my people need to know exactly where I land. And so if you need someone who is going to do things through a specific theological lens, I cannot say that I'm going to be able to offer that with any competence. So that's why I need to know, what are some of the wise folks in your community that we can tap into? Because we can talk about clinical impact, and then maybe that is their part in the work. That's what community is. You don't have to be everything to everybody. Perhaps community is tapping into some of that. And so the burden is lessened on you to feel obligated to do something that you don't feel comfortable
Um, this is partly why we're creating space for this workshop we're offering in June, because what we've been noticing is that we do agree with you. We think it is unethical for people to evangelize in session. like, and there is something that you're saying here that I really appreciate, where you're like, hey, we have to start with our why. Like, what is it that's coming up for the therapist, right? Like, getting in touch with that.
with.
Um, and also leaning on the collective, right? Because there's a reason why there are healers, there are therapists, right? There are like pastors, and there are like there's a community of people that help heal community, right? And so we need everybody, but there is something about the ethics here that to me is also about trauma informed care too. Like, the ethics is tied to trauma informed care. They, like, to me, they're really related, and we need them both. Um, so shifting to our next question, the reason we're asking this question. So what we noticed in our profession, and maybe you're noticing it too, Professor Johnson, that there's this like space where this pressure to be an expert with everything. And when it comes to like spiritual mental health practitioners, or those who are spiritually inclined or drawn to that work, um, we want to like normalize that you don't have to be an expert in it, but we do want people to feel really prepared to support folks navigating religious or spiritual trauma. And like, what do you think about, like, what can mental health practitioners do to create space to help clients? I feel like you offered a lot of gems earlier. Are there others that we can think about
Mhm.
that they could offer without this pressure to be like an expert? Or like, if you are if you grew up in a Baptist tradition but your client grew up Pentecostal, right? Like, how do we support them?
Mhm.
Like, you don't need to be an expert, and like, you don't need to know about Pentecostal per se, right? But like, what is it that could be supportive for mental health practitioners in terms of creating that space?
Yeah. I would first say that it's important that we acknowledge that we are lifelong learners. That's what our ethic is. That we commit to being lifelong learners. We keep doing these CE things, and licensure and all of this stuff has its own complications and its own history of gatekeeping and so many different things. And licensure is designed to protect the public on some level. And so part of it is remembering that we learn as a part of that protection, a part of honoring what we say that we want to do. So many folks want to help people, and I want to help people too. And part of that helping is knowing if I'm the helper or I'm not, or I'm the facilitator to getting to the helper. And so knowing that we don't have to know everything, I have said to my students more than once that I have learned to either be a shining example or a cautionary tale. And I'm okay with that, because part of doing the work is being human together. Messing up. Sometimes when we do role plays, I'll put on the slides, okay, let's go practice messing up together. Because it isn't about perfection, it's about learning, it's about the process. And even the idea of perfection isn't about flawlessness, it's about completion, getting to a place where you feel complete. And then when you get to that next level, then there is more work to be done. And we evolve like this until we no longer exist. And if we do not evolve, we stagnate. And what stagnates ultimately ceases to exist in a healthy way. So I think it's important for clinicians, for anybody, just to be curious, to be a listener, to listen deeply, and to listen with curiosity. Um, We talk about listening for explicit spiritual language, implicit spiritual language, listening for spiritual struggles and resources. And also that happens through screening and assessment. So a spiritual screening is religion an important part of your day-to-day life and what brings meaning and purpose and help to you? Would you like that to be a part of the work we do? If the answer is yes, and you're not prepared, perhaps that is the place for screening and referral. If it is yes, and you're not prepared, but you've been working on it, then this is the place for honesty and curiosity and humility and good supervision. If it is yes, and you're prepared, take off and do what you have been designed to do as a clinician. But also finding a community of practice, because we can't do this by ourselves. I think that it is essential for us to be in community. And I emphasize this with my students, my colleagues, that we are community and we help sustain us, not just the workshops that we attend and the trainings that we attend, but having colleagues that can help us think through these dilemmas that we can text in the middle of the night or right after a session, like, hey, can we talk about this? I may not have done this right. Can we walk through this and how can I make repair? So those kinds of things are really important. And also, again, knowing your community. Who is a, reasonable and knowledgeable space to talk about the theological or spiritual concepts that you haven't quite acquired yet. Is one of the reasons why I appreciate being in community with chaplains, because chaplains, like some of my colleagues that I'm doing this work around student placements, one of them is a Baptist mystic. One of them is a religious naturalist. I didn't even know what that was until we began in community. And I learned of Celtic friars and rabbis and priestesses of the Orisha tradition, like of the Yoruba tradition. So many people that I've been able to be in community with. And the thing that they have taught me is that chaplains practice and provide. They practice the tenets, the rituals according to their faith in which they've been ordained. And they provide access to the free exercise of religion to people who have that need. They don't have to be practitioners. They've got to be space holders. And that is what feels like, yeah, this is social work. This is what we do as social workers when it's done well. Because that applies to any modality that we use. Everybody doesn't resonate with CBT. Everybody doesn't resonate with EMDR. So we've got to be able to practice and provide according to the skills that we have learned, and then provide according to what we can do within our space and allow our clients to teach us. I have a client who uses tarot, and we had a conversation and she mentioned something about a tarot card. And I was like, what? Tell me about that, because I don't know anything about it. So I don't have to be the expert, but I can be a learner. And that was a powerful moment for that client. I learned about the Tower card and about its, freeing from limiting beliefs and going into chaos and change and transition. I'm like, okay, let's talk about how that works with what we have been working on. I don't have to believe it because we're not in a church building. She has to believe it. And we know that the research says part of common factors in therapy, one of the things that is a determining factor in the successful outcome of therapy is that the client believes in the work that they're doing and that the therapist believes in the client's abilities. We don't have to know everything. We just both have to be enthusiastic and be willing to mess up together and be human and humble together. So that's my suggestion, my invitation, and my encouragement. And it's what I try to do with the clients that I serve.
I appreciate so much the intention and just thoughtfulness related to that response. I think that, how much assessment is being highlighted is really important too. as Biani mentioned, we've talked quite a bit about spiritual assessments, like what's out there, what the gaps are. So I love how you're bringing that piece and screening into this conversation. Not only related to the clients and what their experiences are, but also thinking about like our abilities and skills and comfortability with what the client may be seeking or needing.
Sure.
Um,
And I just want to mention another thing around
please.
assessment, because there are formal assessments that we can use. We don't have to make them up in our heads, which, that can be stressful. It's like, well, how am I going to ask this? What am I going to say? There are three specifically that I mention when I'm doing my training and teaching that are helpful, but there are many others. But one of them is called the HOPE approach to spiritual assessment, and HOPE stands for Hope, Organized Religion, Personal Spiritual Practices, and Effects on Medical and End of Life Care. So you can ask these questions about what is important to the client or to the patient and how it's relevant to the work that you're doing. Then there's also the MEMBRA, which is the questions for brief, explicit assessment. And MEMBRA stands for meaning, importance, membership, belief, relevance, and action. So you're asking these explicit questions about what religion or spirituality means to this person, how important it is to them, where they find that meaning in community, what their beliefs are, and if it's relevant to the work you're doing, and then what they want to do with it. And so there's some guidance there that is pretty specific that helps you understand your capacity, the client's desires, and then what direction to take. So I think it's important to know that there are tangible examples of how to start the conversation, how to broach the conversation, even of difference around identity, around beliefs, so that you can know the places where you can enter into this journey with someone.
So grateful for these assessment tools. Um, Thank you, Professor Johnson. Thank you. Um, there was something you said that just escaped me, but it's okay. It wasn't meant to be asked.
Okay. Okay.
I know we're looking at the time, and I know we're getting closer to the end. But I wanted to kind of recap some things, what we like talked about today, and I'm feeling really grateful. Um, I think the piece around assessment really resonated and was a strong theme. I also appreciate your invitation about why it might be hard for folks to bring in spirituality. And I like this invitation of starting with why, like what is coming up for that practitioner, right? Like what about their relationship to religion and spirituality that resonated? This ethic to be lifelong learners. I think you brought up ethics in a way that's really important for us to think about ethics and trauma informed care. I think one of the pieces too is around the cultural markers and how decolonizing is also about the client being able to reimagine and like define their relationship to spirituality or their relationship to healing and liberation as a decolonizing practice. Um, I love that you're like, we don't name it for them, right? Like our work is to let them name it for themselves. So these are so many gems from tonight. So grateful. I think the one that's like staying with me is like evangelizers do not belong in the clinical space. And
If that is not the goal of
therapy,
session,
right.
right? I want to be very clear. Pastoral counselors, Christian counselors, therapists, counselors of affinity religious groups, 100%. And if a person says, this is important to me, and you're ready to whip out the scriptures and eisegese and exegese and engage in this hermeneutical reflection, have at it. What I'm saying is that, and I feel like this could be kind of freeing. You don't have to know from Genesis to Revelation. we don't have to know those things and feel like we're obligated to
Mm,
reflect on or refute a theological issue. That's why we have community of experts. Let someone else teach us. And then we come back together so that we can help that client because it's a process. We're not going to solve any of these. Well, it is not always possible to solve the issues, the concerns that come up in one session. It is
right.
an iterative process. So that's a perfect time to be like, hey, could we talk about such and such? Have you ever heard of such and such? Is there anything that I can do to help this client? Or again, choice and consent. Hey, I want to make sure that you are getting the support that you need. And I am familiar with this particular practitioner. Would you be open to my connecting you with them, getting some more information from them so that I can better serve you? They say yes, we're going to learn a bit more. They say no. Thank you for letting me know that. And so I'm going to be really interested to hear more about how this is meaningful to you in your language.
Mm. I mean, I think this really resonates for us because I think what we've seen happen is that people are using theology in therapy in a way that's not ethical or responsible. And it's beautiful to hear the invitation. There is something that's freeing about this to sort of be like, hey, here's what you can do instead that's in alignment with values and ethics and social work values, that it's about like the community, leveraging the community and being really honest about the ways that you really can support your client. So like, yeah, I just really appreciate that.
Mm.
I think that I hope that does bring folks relief too, because this pressure to be the expert, and I think something you mentioned about perfectionism too, and how that plays a part in this is really important, to like abandon this idea for like perfect and lean into curiosity and deep listening and understanding. So really thank you for that. Um, yeah, thank you for that. I don't know if I did a good job wrapping it up, but we are going to move into main takeaways. And Professor Johnson, I'll probably, what are your takeaways from today's episode? You care to share any that come to
Um,
you?
well, I would say that my main takeaway is the hope is that we feel free to do the work that we do, to feel grateful and curious and excited about it, to see it as a privilege, rather than to feel burdened to show up with perfection and expertise. We have to be careful with this idea of outcomes as the measure of us as good clinicians.
Mhm.
You don't have to have a perfect session and know everything to have impacted someone. And that's, I think, the takeaway is
Mhm.
that hopefully we feel free and excited and again honored to do this work, knowing that we do it an hour a week, maybe 3 hours a week if we're doing some IOP kind of stuff, or 3 hours a day. But the vast majority of time that people spend is in community. So the hope is that we are a part of a larger community that relieves us of the sense of responsibility to do it all and do it all right.
Thank you so much for sharing with us your takeaway. Again, continuing to drop gems for us, even as we wrap things up. Um, I I'm going to say thank you again for joining us. It has been a pleasure to, again, just hear more about your work, the things that you find interesting, and, your perspective on these questions and topics that not only Beyonce and I talk about, but, with other practitioners as well. I think for me, the main takeaway is, again, that recentering of community, grounding in being a part of the ecosystem, the ecosystem of support for clients, and really just encouraging other practitioners and therapists to recenter that for themselves as well. That should be hopefully a goal of the practice, is to be identifying additional relationships and spaces and places for folks to be receiving, holistic kind of support, which for me resists. And I didn't bring this word up during our live stream, but I feel like a lot of our conversation has also been about saviorism, resisting saviorism, and how that feels like a heavy dynamic within like religious spiritual integration. And so, yes, recentering community, one individual in an ecosystem, which I feel like helps with resisting saviorism. So that's what I will offer.
I really love that. I love that, like the invitation to resist saviorism and abandon perfectionism in service for like being an eternal learner and student. I feel like I mentioned main takeaways already. So we're gonna just remind y'all again, which is why we're so excited. We are offering a workshop to continue this conversation, resisting the woo-woo, ethical considerations to integrating spirituality and therapy. And y'all, it's gonna be a really powerful time because we are gonna talk about resisting woo-woo culture and saviorism and spiritual bypassing and all the sort of ethical challenges that could come up when we're doing this work of integrating spirituality. And this interactive virtual workshop is happening June 8th at 2 p.m. It's a 2-hour workshop. It's going to be engaging and dynamic. We're going to be weaving in some really powerful case examples, narrative therapy tools, mindfulness and divination. Registration is open now. Go visit bit.ly/RSW resist for tickets. And we have prices for students. We have many accessible prices for so many different types of folks coming to our event. It's good for counseling students, social work students, social workers, therapists, and even spiritual practitioners who are really interested in learning ways to integrate spirituality through an ethical lens, an ethical frame. So please join us. And yeah, that is our workshop. Um, Professor Johnson, I just wish we had more time, but I'm really grateful. You are just a beacon of like wisdom, and I feel really grateful that we had this hour with you. And we hope that folks tune in, um, and rewatch this episode, y'all, because there were so many gems that were dropped. Like I'm about to rewatch it after it's over. So we hope that you do too. So much important medicine for us as social workers, spiritual practitioners. And yes, thank you so much for being here, y'all. Thank you for being in community with us and supporting a heart-centered podcast by two queer Black femme healers and spiritual social workers who are committed to exploring the intersection of magic, spirituality, mental health, and everything in between. Y'all, we want to stay connected. We are really committed to building this community of spiritual practitioners and healers. So make sure you subscribe to our channel here on YouTube, and make sure you also get notified like for future notifications of events that we're having and offerings and future episodes. Sign up in our landing page on our website to hear about the workshop and other offerings that we got coming. And our newsletter happens every month, so you want to stay connected with that. And make sure you follow us on socials, IG and TikTok at Reclaiming Soul Work. Again, Professor Johnson, thank you so much for being here with us. And to the community, thank you for being with us too. We'll see y'all next time.